The thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Justice requires us to remember when any citizen denies his fellow, saying his color is not mine, or his beliefs are strange and different. In that moment, he betrays America.
Be nice and patient and continue to pray. In 100 or 200 years, the problem will work itself out.
I believe that truth is the glue that holds government together. Not only our government, but civilization itself.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
This nation was founded by men of many nations and backgrounds. It was founded on the principle that all men are created equal, and that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened.
America is never wholly herself unless she is engaged in high moral principle. We as a people have such a purpose today. It is to make kinder the face of the nation and gentler the face of the world.
There is nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America.
Through much of the last century, America's faith in freedom and democracy was a rock in a raging sea.
Starting today, we must pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and begin again the work of remaking America.
Hey, good afternoon. A little different time for me than usual, but I am. And no, I was not kidding, actually. Here I am on a Wednesday afternoon, and I'm going to go over every outstanding criminal and civil case right now that is got Donald Trump in it. Okay, because I'm getting a lot of DMs about the status of this case or that case in regards, and there's a lot of confusion. And, you know, hey, I don't blame you because I've spent weeks straightening all this out, and I've got tablet after tablet here with all the notes on everything. And if you just look at the media on any given day, they talk about this case or that case, and they got like nicknames for everything, and it's just really confusing. Okay. And well, I just want to help you straighten it out, just the facts. I'm really going to try to be as unbiased as I can. You will have to give me a little patience for some of my snarky comments. I can't help it. Some of the stuff that's going on with these cases is absolutely ridiculous. And you'll agree with me or not, but I would just like to put out a little disclaimer that I'm an independent. Don't call me. I do lean a little left, you know. I do not understand a lot of the stuff that's going on right now. I also believe in law and order, and I'm all for the legal system. It's just my thing. So a lot of times I get a little testy, okay, a little testy when it comes to people just like, you know, pushing the envelope on, you know, being above the law. But that's all I'm going to say about that. Yeah. Don't get me sidetracked there, sir. Like, you know who I'm talking to too. But it is nice to see some of you here. I'm going to try not to be boring, but hey, it's a lot of cases and it's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo and things like that. But we're going to start. Why don't I just start first? If you know, hey Charlie, thank you for being here to mod. Could anybody in the chat just tell me if I'm coming through okay? I know my voice sounds a little rough, but it really is me. It's me and a frog, apparently. It just came on this morning. I don't know what's going on, but I feel fine, you know. I know. I'm saying 5 times 5. Does that mean it's okay? All right. Well, here we go. Oh, Charlie, I love the fact that you've got Chucky next to your name. You know, that's my favorite minion. Thanks, Rocket Couch, and hello, and Commander and Karen, hello to you too, Darth. Um, I, yeah, Quiz, I am, because little brother, he never hears me anyway. Like you know. Thank you very much, Commander. I appreciate that. All right, let's get started. All right, we're gonna start with a civil case. Okay. Goes back all the way to September of 2022. Now, in fairness, Trump and his attorneys tried to settle with Letitia James, the district attorney for New York, the state of New York, on this civil case, which is based on fraudulent business practices and underpaying their taxes and doing all kinds of things to break the law in New York in regards to how businesses are operated, how they're structured, how they actually, the applications they get filled out, and what, all of it, the whole thing. This was not something that was filed lightly. A lot of times the media is not actually bringing to light that the grand jury, an actual secret grand jury, had 75 witnesses, thousands of pages of documentation, years of investigation, and they took months going over the evidence before they allowed this civil case to come forward by Letitia James. Now, if you hear the media report on it, they will just say, and I mean the media on both sides, I'm not talking one side or the other here. Let's just talk mass media in general, only really wants to say that this is a witch hunt. That New York doesn't like Trump. Well, Trump has been in New York for a very long time. And as an East Coaster, I could tell you, being here on the Eastern Seaboard of the United States, that that's a true statement. Nobody here really likes the man. He's made a lot of enemies. He did his business and he may make some money, but he keeps his money by not paying his workers, by stiffing contracts. He freaking did a whole deal in Atlantic City here in my state that people are never going to forgive him for, ruining the whole area. He's filed more bankruptcies on the East Coast and folded more businesses and failures than I can count on all the digits. Like, I don't have enough digits, toes included. All right. If you look up Donald Trump lawsuits, you will find over, I think we're up to 6,000. Okay. And a lot of them are complaints, working complaints, violations, building violation complaints, failure to pay contracts, failure to pay employees, all kinds of injury stuff, things like that. Now, in fairness, businesses often get into litigation, especially in real estate, especially in these high market games. That's a standard. Thousands? Well, I'm not so sure about the thousands. Okay. This man knows how to rack it in. But anyway, Letitia James went forward and she filed this civil lawsuit for $250 million in aggregated fees, back taxes, you name it, for the people of New York, saying that, well, Donald Trump has been cheating them. All right. Now, the judge in this case is Arthur Engeron, and you may have heard that name repeatedly in the news lately, and we'll get to that. Judge Engeron, at this point in the game, I would say it is fair to say that he's a bit cranky, and I don't blame him. He's had to say things, do things, and witness things lately that a judge sitting in a court, even in New York, really has never seen before. But we'll get to that too. This trial is ongoing right now. Right now. Okay. They all are, Darth. Like, that's not news. Like, you could say that about every single one of them on either side, seriously. But anyway, this judge sitting on the bench, he's got defense attorneys Chris Kreis and Alina Haber and a slew of other attorneys in there. And it's really kind of been a bit of theatrics going on inside the courtroom. Let's say the trial began on October 2nd. It's ongoing now. We're going into the 6th week. The defense is actually putting their case on now. All right. they actually are, I believe today was the day that Donald Jr. was coming back. Now, Donald Jr. had already taken the stand previously, as is Eric, the only sibling who was involved in the business who did not actually have to come to court and was actually removed was Ivanka Trump. One, based on the statute of limitations for the actual offenses that they could document happened, the transactions that happened under her. So she was actually removed from the case, but she did testify. She was compelled to testify. She tried to get out of it, but she was compelled to testify because she had personal knowledge of these things that were going on. And she was actually listed as an officer of many of the businesses that have been listed in this filing. Now, Letitia James at the district attorney's office did a really good job of listing all of the businesses, everything. Okay. So one or the other of the children at any given time, were actually in charge of certain things. Also, the lawyers and actually several of the other key employees, like Weissenberg, who has already pled guilty in another case in New York for fraud, kind of involved with this one, but not, but a little more limited, and actually gave testimony in this trial too, which, although he is still supporting and still working with Donald Trump, and they're all still good, is him pleading guilty to the other accounting transactions that happened didn't really help the defense at all in this case. And I do have to say that the way the witnesses are coming forward, the way the questions are being asked and how the defense is actually presenting them, it's a little confusing to me, because in some cases, and I don't mean this to be, prejudicial in any way, but as a layperson, in some cases, it actually looks like the witnesses that are putting forward and the way that they are questioning him is actually damaging to Donald Trump's case. And actually, Donald Trump did a lot of damage to his own case when he took the witness stand, because he wanted to give a speech and he didn't want to answer questions that were directly asked of him by the prosecution. He wanted to only talk about what he wanted to talk about. And the judge had to keep reminding him that, this is a court of law. There's a procedure here. You answer the questions, and then, if you want to make a statement, it can be submitted at a later date, or it comes through your attorney. Your attorney can ask the questions to actually bring those statements out. Now, that's procedure. What you don't get to do is get up there, grab that mic, and do a speech, or pull something out of your pocket that you're going to read to the court. You need to be asked the questions, because the prosecution and the defense attorneys, they're actually in charge of the show, and they're actually building their cases. And it's in the process of actually speaking to the witness, asking the questions, and getting them to confirm, deny, or add additional information that builds the case, that lays out the foundation, Yeah. So anyway, the trial attorneys right now, Chris Keiss and Alina Hava, they're having a little bit of trouble controlling him. In this particular case, Donald Trump and his attorneys have been sanctioned. There's been gag orders that have been appealed. Everything involving this case has been appealed multiple times. Okay, multiple times. The gag order was just recently upheld again by the appeals court, and actually they're taking it farther again. They're going to appeal it again, but right now the gag order has been reinstated again, and that gag order involves the judge's clerk and the judge and the jury. It was originally instated because Donald Trump, he likes to tweet. We see it all the time. It's in the media every single day in regards to every single one of these cases. He is using all of these, I don't want to say the word using like abuse or anything like that, but actually he is implementing information from these cases into his campaign. We know he's running for president. Okay. However, the Supreme Court in several of these cases has already stated that, there's going to be a problem with that, because Well, he doesn't have presidential immunity because he's not the president. And just saying you're going to want to be a president doesn't give you presidential immunity. Okay. The other big argument in a lot of these things is freedom of speech. Okay. And like I always say, there's freedom of speech, and then there's the consequences for running your mouth. And unfortunately, a lot of these cases have a lot to do with that. Okay. Let's move on. $250 million. And Letitia James likes to frame this as the art of the steal instead of the art of the deal. Basically, the nuts and bolts of the case is that he overvalued or undervalued his properties, his real estates, his businesses based on what he was doing. Okay. They would become very high and inflated, and he'd be worth billions if he was going for a loan for the bank. However, if he had to pay taxes, he would go down. He would look at the actual property valuations from the area and would find reasons to even bring it lower. So there are large, huge disparagings between the properties that are listed, same properties listed for tax purposes versus loan purposes, so actually, and then it's the documentation of that. Now, is that so unusual? Well, one thing that Donald Trump says, everybody does it. That's what he said. That was his defense, actually. He said that he's being persecuted for something that everybody does every single day. Well, yes and no. Okay. People value properties differently all the time. However, standard accounting and standard business practices don't come from me. Yes, I got a degree in this. I did it for a living. Don't even go there. There are standard business practices. It's not just the whim of Donald Trump or anybody else. There are standard business practices. There's even laws in each state, county, and city where you register your businesses that you need to follow. Standard accounting practices exist. Yes, they do. And most people follow them in their businesses. Do they fudge them? Sometimes, yes. Do they break the law? Sometimes, yes. Not to this degree. And they don't get in front of a court and say, hey, everybody does it. It's not a problem. It doesn't mean anything. You're just picking on me because I make a lot of money. That's just not true. Okay. There was so much evidence from the grand jury went over that Letitia James put in the whole packet that went to the judge when the trial was going to be set forth to go forward, that the judge has already entered a partial summary judgment before trial saying fraud existed, business practices were violated, the law in New York was clearly violated repeatedly here. Now, the only thing that the jury is actually going to decide, we're going through 6 weeks of trial, regardless of what Donald Trump's team has decided that they're actually going against the charge already, even though the judge has already done summary judgment. Now, that is on appeal. Granted, that could go to the Supreme Court. When the judgment went through, automatically what Letitia James had put in there, that if they were in violation of this, then standard practice would be that those businesses would be shut down. What happened was several of the businesses were froze. He was not permitted to actually transfer large amounts of money, sell the businesses, whatever. But because he is able to appeal, and rightly so he did. I mean, this is a serious charge in serious actions on the part of the state of New York. So, of course, they should appeal. Of course, it's going to go up to the Supreme Court. We're going to see what happens, whether Judge Aragon's actual partial summary judgment actually stands. Okay. But right now the jury is actually listening to both sides just to decide the damages and what he should have to pay, and whether Letitia James gets the whole $250 million or however what they actually feel that those damages are. But that's the state that the trial is in right now. Okay. Now, the Supreme Court did not stay the trial, nor did they dismiss the charges. Nope. His motion to dismiss was denied. Okay, it's being appealed again. It is his right to do it, to keep appealing, but it just keeps, coming back down and going back up. But the main one that we want to wait for is whether or not the partial summary, if there was enough there. Now, before Judge Arganon even had Donald Trump into his courtroom or the lawyers there in front of him, he did this summary judgment, and he also did it predicated on what the evidence actually was. So in order for them to overturn it, they can't just say that they're not going on freedom of speech, they're not going on presidential immunity because that has already been decided. Okay, what they actually have to go on is based on whether or not Judge Aragon had enough evidence to actually make that decision. And rightly so, a judge is not going to risk his judgeship or his decisions. Judges don't like to get overturned. More often than not, judges will, take the middle road. They don't like other judges coming in and overturning their stuff. It's not a good look. Okay, it's not good for their reputation. It's not good for their career. It's not good for their advancement. So, in looking at what the legal channels are all saying about it, and I've contacted some lawyers on my own, it does look as if it will hold up, because they can't really see a situation to where, with all of that evidence in documentation, it took years of the fraudulent business practice. I mean, if you purposely do it one way for one purpose and another way for another, I mean, it just looks at fraud. And unfortunately for Trump and his team, how long it took to document all this in the documentation that they have, they're clearly showing a pattern that this was an intent. This was how they ran their businesses. And that's really bad news, because now all the businesses that are tied to him are in jeopardy. And they could lose their licenses in New York, their ability to practice here. They could be sold off to pay the tax debt or the judgment. Right now, everything's frozen. And also, there is an investigation going on to money he already, since this has happened, chose to move to pay for expenses. Large amounts of money that he did not notify. He needed to notify receivership, or through some policy. I don't want to say receivership like it's bankruptcy, because it's not. But he was required to notify and follow a certain procedure if he was going to move large amounts of money from any of those businesses. And he chose not to. Somehow or another, that information did not get to the right person. And so there's now another investigation on that. There's been violations of gag orders. There's been, threats to the jury. There's been lots of stuff. But mainly the gag order has involved the clerk. And there's a relationship with the clerk and the judge. The judge depends on this clerk. They're trying to make it a big deal, like the clerk is running stuff. But, anybody who watches court on a regular basis knows that the clerk do a lot of the work, just like in a lawyer's office with paralegals and all. Clerkships are hardworking. They do it. They get the stuff, they help with the precedent and pulling the cases, to prove things. Judge Arganon's been very good about documenting precedent for his rulings here. The gag order got reversed and this and that several times. He's not so worried about, people saying stuff about him, but he doesn't really feel that the people in his court or anybody that's working with him, and especially the jury, should be threatened. Unfortunately, in this case, Donald Trump has actually even threatened witnesses in some of his tweets, or actually that is the case that's being made by, prosecution coming forward. Okay. But basically, within the next week or so, we're going to find out. Now, based on the motion schedules and when anything goes into court, the judges and the scheduling department, they put out the whole big schedule. And by mid-January, Judge Aragon should have this thing all tied up, final judgments made, sent, order for summary judgment, everything through. But that's also going to depend on the appeals court too. Like, he could go through and close this all out, and then we're going to wait and see what happens with the appeals court. Donald Trump and his team think it's a win that it actually made it into the appeals court. They agreed to actually review it based on the partial summary, and they're calling that a big win. It is, because I mean, it could have been a loss if they just tossed it out and said, no, there's nothing here, that's ridiculous, which has happened to several of the other appeals, but not this one, not the one on summary judgment so far. And as far as the gag order, that was reinstated actually just recently, with more severe penalties to be put in place to Donald Trump in his team, including his lawyers, should it be violated again during this process. But then again, you know, like I said, the defense team and Donald Trump have actually appealed that again. They want it looked at again. They think that that is restricting his freedom of speech, which, you know, he can talk all he wants. What he can't do is threaten and interfere with you know, the proceedings of the court. Okay, that's a little bit different. I mean, you know, you can run for president, but it doesn't make you above the law, period. Okay. Yeah, the only thing about presidential immunity is while you're in office, and you're not immune forever. You get out of office, whatever you did, they still charge you for it. It's not a free pass to do whatever you want. I think there's some misinterpretation of what it actually means there, because it does not mean immunity forever. It was actually put into place for people that in Congress, in Senate, in the president, and it actually applies in some way to like police officers and everybody in law enforcement. While doing your job, you should not be, you know, subject to these kind of proceedings, because it would interfere with the running. And it makes good sense. Nobody wants, you know, the actual sitting president sitting in a trial room. You want to run in the country, you know. All right. This was from the Seattle Times. This is actually their interpretation of when Donald Trump took the witness stand. Okay. This was everywhere. Okay. So he did have a hissy fit. He did. Alina Hobbs said that she was told to shut up. She wasn't told to shut up. She was told to sit down, because she said Donald Trump could say whatever he wants. And the judge actually had to remind a lawyer about regular standard procedure in the courtroom, about how you have to ask the questions. And one thing I want to note, given the opportunity for Donald Trump to be on the stand, the defense attorneys chose not to ask any of the questions to bring forward what it was he wanted to say. And I find that very curious. Like, why not? They still had the opportunity. It almost looked staged, like PR, because they wanted to say that he was silenced because he couldn't give a speech, when they know that that's not standard procedure. They did not petition the court for that to happen. He just went up there and he said, I want to read this. And the judge says, no, you got to answer the questions of the prosecution and the defense. And whatever comes forward, comes forward. And he argued back. And then his attorneys argued back and decided not to ask him any of the questions, that whatever it was that he wanted to say could have been said had his defense attorneys come forward and just asked him the information to get it out. And so I'm really I'm perplexed as to why they didn't do that, because they actually made it kind of worse for him. I do believe they made it worse. But, all right. Next case. This one is actually stalled right now. Is nothing active really going on. This case goes, this was the first criminal case charged in March of 2023 against Donald Trump, the first one. And it's actually a precedent case, because it actually happened during the campaign. The charges that they're actually basing on happened during the campaign. And it all goes back to Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels. Now, the attorney, Michael Cohen, for Donald Trump was actually pled and actually has served time for what happened here already. In his part out of it, he's going to be a witness here. So we already have a guilty and documentation in the courts of what happened. So when it comes to the trial, that's all going to be in already. Okay. Donald Trump is going to, of course, and his team are going to be attacking Michael Cohen as a liar and not a good witness. And, he was guilty of all of this. He can't be a witness, he's a bad guy. Okay. And understandably so. He was a lawyer. He did the wrong thing. He admits it. Okay. This Manhattan DA, he's going forward with the charges. It's over several checks, but there's 34 charges over several because of how the checks were entered, cashed, entered in fraudulently. In other words, the money was used to give to Stormy Daniels to not do a article or a press release or whatever it was, and it got put into the books as something else. There is allegations that it was campaign funds and that it was not categorized properly or reported properly. All of these things broke laws in New York and in campaign finance all along. Now, the other thing is that Judge Juan Merchant, there was a denied motion to recuse based on the court. And I found this interesting. They tried to get the judge thrown off the case because he made a $15 donation to the Biden campaign way back. Now, judges are allowed to have political affiliation. Most judges are appointed or voted in by one party or the other. If you could not hear a case against anybody from the other party because you were voted in by that party, the whole legal system would be a mess. It just goes against the whole thing about what a judge actually does. Okay. Judges they take it very seriously. And it was $15. This is not a major contribution. He didn't work for the campaign. I could see if he settled all of his cases only positively for Biden, I could understand. But I really don't think the defense is really doing any good for Donald Trump when they do all this frivolous filing. Like, I want to know who's steering the ship here, because I guess they don't care about looking bad, because this stuff is getting tossed out as ridiculous and frivolous and a waste of the court's time. And it's unfortunate because, like, you want valid argument, and I know they have some valid argument. I'm not going to sit here and deny that some of this is absolutely ridiculous, even on the prosecution end. Okay. Yeah, you did just hear me say that. Don't fall off your chairs, people. I did just say that. Even on the prosecution end, like, I am willing to admit that some of it is getting crazy. Okay. But the actual ridiculousness being filed on the defense end is really not to the benefit of Donald Trump. Like, somebody needs to take control here. Seriously. If it's Donald Trump, which it could be, okay, then that's a problem. He should really listen to good quality lawyers, whether he can get them or not, because, unfortunately, as we get into the other cases, you're going to find out about lawyers being sanctioned and lawyers losing licenses and lawyers having to plead guilty. Being a Donald Trump lawyer right now is not a good thing. Okay. The trial for this one in particular is in March 20 of the spring, this coming March of 2024. But that date, I wrote tentative there because we also have another trial coming up at the same time. And Alvin Braggs has already said that this case is not as important as some of the others, and he would be willing to reschedule his. All right. And like I said, it's all about the Michael Cohen case, but there were 34 felony, and that's the thing, felony counts in the penal code. Okay. It does have to do with $130,000 that was paid out to Stormy Daniels. Okay. And Donald, in true fashion, has already, from the start, signaled that he'd go after the district attorney. He has made tweet after tweet on True Social in regards to him being a psychopath and that it's all purely political. It is about breaking the law. Okay. I don't know. I mean, I ask you this, is it purely political because Donald Trump decided to run as a candidate? I mean, when I look at it, it is about the law. No one can deny that some laws have been broken here. And are you above the law because you decide to run for president? I don't think so. And because here in America, no one's supposed to be above the law. Law and order is supposed to be the law of the land. And I thought that was something that all of us agreed on. okay, and that no one could be above. This is not a kingship, or you don't wear a crown. You don't get to make the laws, okay? Running for president is a privilege, okay? It's when any of us Americans can do. You get anybody behind you, yes, you could do it. But it doesn't mean you're above the law, right? You can call the DA a psychopath if you want, but if that violated business practices, I think he's more petty than a psychopath. I think, better terminology, could be used. And you know what? If the facts are there and you did it, okay? Because in all of these attacks, we're not seeing any evidence as to he didn't do any of this. In most cases that I'm going to show you, he actually admits to doing what he did. In the business practice, in the lawsuit we just talked about, the civil lawsuit brought by Letitia James for the state of New York, he admits to doing it. And so do his accountants, and so did the bank. And actually, some guy Moen just testified the other day, and he referred to a John Lennon quote that, Donald Trump is a dreamer and a good American. And if he wants to think that Mar-a-Lago is worth a couple of $1 billion, then more power to him. That was what the defense put on the witness stand to back up Donald Trump's ability to just value his businesses any way he can, when pushed forward by the prosecution as to how he calculated this and what was the formula. He said he wouldn't actually be able to recreate it because it's on a whim. Like, he didn't use the word whim, but he said it varies anytime. It depends on what I'm looking at. And there's no real way. There's no formula for the calculation of it. It's just done. And when challenged as to why he included memberships and Donald Trump didn't, he just said, that's how I got to the number. This is what the defense put through as their defense witness for Donald Trump. And basically, it just shows that they're not saying he didn't do it. They're just, again, saying that that's normal. It's not. It's not. And I realize that not a lot of people are going to realize, come to that conclusion if they're not in business or they don't have larger financial dealings, if they're not versed in the language and the laws of how business and accounting practices are done, it could be confusing. Well, the one thing I'm not is I'm not going to throw shade on this, but I am going to say I don't really misrepresent the facts if I can avoid it. And if I make a mistake, I always correct it. And when I tell you these business laws exist and standard accounting practices are actually a thing, they are. It's the life I lived in this country every day for a good number of years. We're going to go on to case number 3. Have I bored you? Should I take a break? Let me pull this down for a second and just check the chat because I need a break. Okay. Hold on here. Hey, Liam. Nice to see you. Hey, Wrecker. Thanks for those otters. I need some otters, boo. Damn, send me more otters. Like, can you hear this voice? Boy. Because if it was true, that would mean that no politician could ever be indicted for a crime. Exactly. Oh, and the other one, get this. No one has ever been charged in my position. No one has ever been charged with this before. And that is going to come up in another ruling. If you use that as a reason to overturn something, that would mean that no first offense ever for anything could ever be charged. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Like, I got to think of more words, but it is. No, Wrecker, you can't, and please don't. You cannot just take money and pretend nothing happened. It's just not a thing, Look at how much he wants to borrow and make sure the assets exceed the collateral needed. This is the figuring that was done. Yes, based on it. He says that and he said one other part of the defense was, if the bank gave me the loan anyway, they know me, they're making money on them. If they're not squawking about it, you got no case. And I'm like, well, no, the law's the law. If the bank doesn't have to actually care about it for you to have broken the law. Hey, Rodent, how are you? No, well, that's not true. He does. We're going to get to that because when we talk about Georgia, man, that was lit. There were some lawyers in there like that. There was a 6-hour hearing. We're gonna talk about that too. Okay, Rocket Couch. He doesn't want to be president. He wants to be president. Okay. Is it king? Yes. It's got to be when people think they know better than their lawyers. Guess what? The customer isn't always right, and the customer isn't a freaking lawyer. Exactly. The law is complicated. Obviously, listen, I love it, and damn it, I would listen to my law. I would not be legalizing my own case. I mean, I would keep my mouth shut, do whatever they said. Years and years of education. I might have an opinion about it, but your business, your livelihood. Hey, Gary, nice to see you. Darth, it's nice that you're here. Hey, Maya, it's cool. How you doing today? I hope you're doing well. Yeah. I don't know. Hey, Commander. All right. Okay. Okay, so now that we've answered Recker's question that he can't just take money and pretend nothing happened, my break's over. Well, let's go. Otherwise, we're going to be here forever. All right. Another criminal case. United States versus Donald Trump. Indictment was unsealed June 9th of 2023 and was revised on July 27th. And it was revised for the purpose of adding a third party, because this one is not just Donald Trump. It's also Waltine Nauta. And then the third party that was added was Carlos de Oliveira. Of course, I'm talking about Mar-a-Lago document case, right? We've seen the pictures. We know what's going on. People are going to say, but Biden had documents, and so did Pence, and so did everybody. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. But that's not the problem. The problem is 2 years of trying to get this stuff back, or actually a year and some months, maybe not 2 years, trying to get this back. Multiple correspondence with Donald, falsified records when they actually returned partial amount of them, attorneys signing that the place has been searched and there's no more documents, and then there's like video footage of them putting more documents to put them over in storage somewhere else. There's video footage of the documents being in a bathroom and on a stage at Mar-a-Lago, where they were having dinners, and multiple people from foreign countries and all over the place were there, and the documents were just there on the stage in boxes. Okay, and some of them were very highly classified. Not all of them, granted. Not every box, not the majority of them, but some of them. Enough of them. Even one would be a violation of his Records Act. And I do need to remind you that when Donald Trump got into office, the first thing that he did was revamp these laws on how to handle the documents, because he was so intent on prosecuting Hillary Clinton, and he still is. He's got lawsuits against her, and he still speaks on it often. And there was a whole big thing in her campaign about, emails and documents and stuff. And it was looked at, and I agree that he should have been, causing us think about it and making people look. And he actually had his cabinet work on the procedures that should be done and made the penalties stricter. The penalties that he's being held accountable for right now came from his restructuring. Well, the one thing he didn't do is follow his own law book here, follow his own rule book. Like, he helped put it out, and then he just decided he didn't have to do it. And that became an issue. Okay. The judge in this case, this was brought forward by the special counsel, Jack Smith. A special counsel is outside of the Department of Justice. So let's just not even talk about this Biden, whatever prosecuting. This was put into place. Biden had nothing to do with it. He couldn't appoint him. Okay. This was what they asked for, a special counsel to look into everything. And the special counsel found enough evidence to press charges, and it took quite a while. The special counsel is also releasing documents as to he has already put out a plan. In this particular case, it gets very difficult to actually see anything because we're talking about confidential, high-class documents here. You can't just lay out the evidence, this, that, and the other thing. Everything's under seal. We also have a lawyer, a judge actually appointed while a judge that was appointed by Trump's administration into her position. And, she's in Florida and she's used to dealing with everybody in that area. And she does things just a little bit differently. There's no right or wrong about it. I'm not going to bash the judge. I don't really think she's doing anything crazy. Actually, I think she's being very cautious. I think she's doing her due diligence. And, but she's not actually doing written orders. She's not. She's doing memorandums that cannot be judged by other judges. Like, there's nothing actually in written. She's doing it's kind of like almost like a stalling thing. And I don't blame her because this case is so hot. I don't blame her for seeing where everything else is going to go and what the prosecution is actually going to finish up with on this case before she actually starts putting things down solid in writing. Now, in most cases, they have asked for everything to be tossed out. She didn't go with that. They asked for all of the evidence to be released to them. She actually agreed with the prosecution when they said that has to actually be a special kind of way to do it because of the actual confidentiality of the records. You just can't take everything out. You can't just make copies of things. You just can't. I mean, look at what the evidence is. That's common sense. Okay. In this case, just recently, about a month or so ago, Donald Trump announced that his previous team of Rowley and some other guy would not be handling this case anymore for him. It would now be Todd Blanche, who is also on a couple of the other cases with a few of the other attorneys. This trial is actually set to go forward in May of 2024, but there is already a memorandum on record. There was a motion put forward by the defense that they wanted to delay this particular case until after the election in 2024. And because he was running for a campaign and he put this long memorandum motion in to have it. First, they tried to get the whole thing tossed because they tried to say that he was acting within his guidelines of his duties. But when you are president, you still don't get to violate. And when he actually was out of his presidency was when all these violations happened repeatedly, because there's documentation of all the correspondence going back and forth of how they asked for the records. They knew some of the records were there. They knew he had access to them. He admitted to having some, whatever. He wouldn't let them search. He turned over some. It's all been pretty well documented by Jack Smith's office. And then they do have the testimony of the people at Mar-a-Lago, several other witnesses. The other two that are named are because they helped move it, or they actually instructed others to move the documents, that they knew about the documents, but then gave testimony when asked that they had no recollection of anything and they didn't know anything. And yet then video evidence and actually other employees documenting things actually pointed them in the direction that they were actually complicit in the hiding of all of this from being turned over to the appropriate authorities. There's more. There's just more. There are 32 felony accounts in this one of willful retention of the national defense. Like, it falls under the Espionage Act. This one's really serious. This one actually has legal terms and actually could affect his career for the rest of his life, as far as whether he could run for office or anything if he's found guilty of any of this. 6 of those other felony counts are obstruction related to crimes to having these documents. That's also serious. He went out of his way to deny having them instead of just turning them over like, whoops, my bad. Just kept adding on with his actions afterwards and the actions of his staff. There are 2 felony counts of false statements where he actually put forward documentation that he didn't have anything. And that's unfortunate because now that can be used against him too. There's a scheduled hearing to confirm the trial date. Like I was saying, Judge Cannon had actually put out a motion to say Donald Trump said he wanted to delay it at the very least, if not overturn everything, to delay it. She did not grant the motion to dismiss, but she did actually say, we're going to leave that date here, but I'll hear oral arguments as to why we should not have the trial in May. When we get together, I think it is in February or March. They'll be doing oral arguments in regards to it. And then she will decide firmly on the motion. She decided not to deny or agree, and just said, like, for now, we're going to keep it there, but we will schedule a hearing to speak more about it. So it was kind of a half win, some win, all during, you may have seen a lot of press on actually the security of the documentation of the document evidence that we've been talking about them going back and forth, prosecution and the defense back and forth in regards to procedures into how the confidentiality of this stuff can be. Like, there is a serious gag order on this, on all of the evidence and everything here. And of course, rightly so. We're talking about, everybody would want to get a hold of this stuff. We got to think about things outside of our country, okay, and just not like the other thing that is, you're going to see in mass media a lot about it is the orders not being written, but standardly, like, if she doesn't need to weigh in on something, why would it? Like, I kind of agree with her. Just leave it this way. It's less for people to appeal and nitpick about, because we're not really moving forward on anything right now. Okay. The next criminal case, another Jack Smith special counsel case. And this one involves January 6th and the actual violation of oath in promise to the people that Jack Smith has put forward in indicting Donald Trump. The judge on this case is Tanya Sue Chuckin. She just did a very well laid out, and I have it down in the description for you. Very well laid out with plenty of precedent and plenty of cases listed against the argument for presidential immunity for the January 6th actions. Okay. The presidential immunity, contrary to popular belief and the brief that was submitted, is not in the Constitution. Yeah, you heard that right. There is nothing in the Constitution that says the president cannot be put up on charges if he breaks the law. Nothing. It's not there. Now, common sense would say, don't book a president while he's sitting in the chair. That would be wrong. And they didn't. But he can be prosecuted for anything he does while he's in office. And actually running your campaign for re-election are not presidential duties. And she laid this out very clearly in there. She also attacked the freedom of speech. Freedom of speech for campaigning, well, yeah, you can do that. Okay. But there's consequences, like we said, for the things that you say. And if your actions and concepts, if you whip up a mob or organize to actually overthrow things here, I mean, they've got documentation going back. Jack Smith just released another 9-page evidence timeline that goes back to the organizing of all of this for years, of how the election fraud and actually campaign was going to go forward, and how he was just going to stay on target. And they actually just listed it all out, as they have to do for discovery and evidentiary hearings. You know, it does not come into immunity here. Presidential immunity is like, it's like a common sense thing. It's like it's like common practice. Why would we? There is actually immunity for Congress and Senate for performing their jobs and things like that while in the act of doing their duty. Okay, there should not actually be charges or anything pressed on them. But the immunity isn't blanketed for the president in that way. It's usually like, it's not a good idea to press charges on a president while he's running the country. What a bad look is that? But it doesn't mean that if the law was actually broke, that he wouldn't come up to charges at a later date, which happened in the civil suit with Jean Carroll. That went through the Supreme Court 3 times. And presidential immunity didn't exist. They just held it up not to have him be sitting in court while he's supposed to be running the country. Okay, these immunity things that they're trying to throw out are kind of like, not being able to press charges to a police officer if something happens through no intent, no criminal intent. Okay, you can't sue them. Okay, because they're doing their job. Same thing with Congress and the Senate. If they pass a law that inadvertently hurts you in some way, you can't sue them for it. I know I'm making it really big, broad strokes there, because I don't want to, not being a lawyer, I don't want to nickel it down to the specific, and misspeak in any way. But it doesn't, it's been denied here. Judge Tanya Suchakin just came through. She listed multiple cases, because in actually the defense is brief for Donald Trump, they were actually saying it's never been done, this and that, and no one's ever been charged. And she actually listed, election interference charges that have been prosecuted on other people. She listed all of it. She said, these aren't true statements. I can't even take these arguments valid if you're not going to make like a true statement. This isn't true. This isn't true. And she pushed back with clear legal judgment here and good case law. And that's why I linked it, because I think, anybody that's interested in that should give it a good look, because it was very well laid out. Okay. Her gag order in this case is to protect the jury. She actually is very firm, and she goes along with Jack Smith when he found out the papers that the witnesses and or the jury should not be harassed in any way with that, and she had put it forth. This trial is scheduled for March 4th. Defense attorneys currently on file are John Lauro and Todd Blanche. And it is going forward. I mean, special counsel already did his discovery listing on the timeline of the information, Yep. There are 2 felony accounts, including one for conspiracy, of obstructing an official proceeding under 18 USC. That official proceeding would have been Mike Pence certifying the election. There's also a felony account in these charges of conspiracy to defraud the United States, violating his oath to office for the people, another against the rights of the people. And whoops, we're going to get to this one too. Now this one, a lot of people think that he should have been charged with insurrection or insidious behavior and everything. But actually, you've got to remember that when the special counsel is going through all of the evidence and everything that happened, he has to actually be able to prove that. Okay. And here's one fact that kind of prevents that. Donald Trump didn't enter the building. He didn't walk up to Mike Pence and say, don't do that. Did he have a tight, phone call with him the night before? Was there some intimidation phone calls made? Is there actual documentation and proof through his actions that he did coordinate with many people for this to happen? Yes. And when he says no one else has been prosecuted for this, that's a misstatement, because since January 6th happened, people have been going on trial every day of the week. There are, I think, over 1,000 prosecutions already for those that were involved, and there's many more pending. And I believe at one time, I'll have to go back to one of my older videos on this, because there was a list that was activated every day. Every day it was updated with charges, identifying, things, property damage, anything. And the charges are all different. They're not all the same. It depends on what the person did. But there was some, people got hurt, people got injured. There's actually charges going back and forth on both sides, about this. So when they talk about, like, he's only being singled out, this and that, but if he was part of what happened and part of the whole thing, then he needs to be not excluded from the process. He needs to be held accountable like they're holding everybody else accountable, Liam, I did not accuse the real winner of stealing my win. I did not make statements knowing that these are crazy people out there who will go to other people that I made the statements about. That's the problem. Like, here's where the intimidation factor comes in. Like, he kind of, like, the one thing about, here in the East Coast, we call him Donnie Boy. And we do it, like, with a little bit of snark, because Donnie always presents himself like he wants to be a mobster, but the mob just wouldn't have him, But everything he does is kind of like that. And the way he speaks to witnesses or people he feels are against him right now, the people that are prosecuting him, the people that are against him, the people that are just not doing what, like, don't see it the way he sees it right now. They are the enemy. And he speaks very threatening of them and disparaging of them. No holds barred. He'll say what he wants. He'll do what he wants. And that should be just fine. Well, in normal circumstances, it is, because words don't necessarily hurt unless they incite people to riot, to go against witnesses, where we have to get additional help as far as protection for the court people, for, death threats that have tripled, if not quadrupled, into the offices, and it has to be taken seriously. I mean, words do cause this kind of stuff to happen, especially when you got a large platform and you got a lot of people that follow you, and you like to speak in insidious and riotous language. He likes to light fires. That's his way, And unfortunately, if something happens when that fire gets lit, he's going to be held accountable. But he's just not seeing the big picture there with any of it. And I'm not saying he has to change. I'm just saying it's different when it's a court of law. It is. And anybody who doesn't actually recognize that fact is just not dealing with the reality of the situation, that the rules that apply to law and order in a court and in the judicial system are not the same. It's not a campaign trail. Okay. It is not, a platform for you to get up there and make speeches, and you're not allowed to intimidate witnesses. Free speech is allowed, and it's documented, and in the law, free speech is allowed to be inhibited when it comes to law and order in the courtroom. The judge is allowed to say, don't talk about it. The judge is allowed to say, don't talk to the witness. Stay away from the jury. Stop, stop, stop. But the defense attorneys in Trump keep pushing back. Nope, it's free speech. It's free speech. And now we're going to get to the big one. I think there's two more. Oh my gosh. You know, that's good. I did an hour already. I did Lowe's in an hour. I'm kind of impressed with myself. You know, have I lost you all? I mean, how many of you have actually left already? I wonder. Like, really? Okay, let's go back. All right. Let's say goodbye to the January 6th case. You know, they call it the January 6th insurrection case. It is actually the United States against Donald Trump. Okay, let's go to the state of Georgia versus Donald Trump and 18 other unfortunate individuals who were part of what Fannie Willis, district attorney in Georgia, says was a conspiracy to corrupt the Georgia election. Well documented here. Okay, and this one's got a lot of documentation. It's got a lot of witnesses. It's got a lot of hoopla going on. It's got some, well, can you hear me salivating? Because it's got some fantastic lawyering going on in just like mind-boggling stuff that let's just get right into it. The indictment happened in August of 2023. Fannie Willis came forward with 41 charges in a 98-page indictment, very well documented. And she's going for racketeering and RICO. And she's serious. And she documented 161 acts on that RICO on charge 1. She listed 18 other conspirators besides Trump, including 3 that were the false electors who put out the labels, including a multitude of lawyers, people involved on every levels, and all key players like Giuliani and Eastman and Meadows and yada, 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 yada. Okay, the document, the complaint, is listed below, and you can read it in detail if you'd like. It's lit. She was serious, okay? There was a lot going on. We already know of civil cases against Giuliani with Ruby Friedman. We know of intimidation. Ruby Friedman's going to be a witness. We've seen articles written about the intimidation practices that happened, the things that they did in Georgia. In Georgia, did an investigation and took great offense. They went to a grand jury with thousands and thousands of documentation, pages, videos, tweets, everything, emails, you name it. It took months, but it came through. August 14th of 2023. They've been working on this since the election. Okay. This is not something that, they decided like last year because he was running for president that they were just going to slam him. That's really not the truth. Is he running for president? Yes, Donald Trump is running for president. But did they decide on that factor? I don't think so, because since the election, they've been working on this. Okay. They've got the documentation to prove it too. The judge in this case is Scott McAfee. He's got a YouTube channel, and his hearings are all videoed. I have watched them all, and I'm going to tell you, some of them are absolutely lit. Okay. The defense attorney that I want to mention in particular right now for the Trump team, and I'm not going to talk about many of the other defendants yet. Okay. We are going to talk about the recent hearing that just happened on December 1st. Okay. That hearing was 6 hours long. All right. That hearing had a lot of motions that needed to be decided in it. Change of venue, motion to dismiss. We're going to get into all of it. Jurisdiction, all of it. Okay. The trial for this particular case is set up for August 5th of 2024. I forgot to put trial date in front of the date there. It should be there. Just pretend you see it. But this motion hearing I want to talk to you about December 1st. All the decisions are still pending. Scott McAfee has not issued a single opinion on any of the motions that were heard in that hearing. And when you hear what went on, you'll kind of understand why. It was a lot to digest. But before we get to that, we've got to talk about the motion to squash for the special grand jury and disqualifying Fannie Willis based on her affiliation and her politics, based on other court cases that she has filed, or the defense, many of them could come forward and try to get everything just tossed out. But based on the review of the grand jury evidence, that didn't happen. That stayed in. Okay. The judge ordered on a special grand jury's report that public portions could be released to actually alleviate some of that stress, so that it was pretty evident that all the documentation was there and the case went forward. Fani Willis also put a documentation letter out on the timing of all of the potential charges. And before we talk about the December 1st hearing in regards to Trump and several of the other, I think the three false electors, they call them, and I put quotes on that because, allegedly false electors, they haven't been convicted yet. Those three and several others, they were all represented in the December 1st hearing in the courtroom of Scott McAfee. However, 4 were not, because now it's like, Trump plus 14, because 4 of the named defendants in this case have already pled guilty, and 3 of them are pretty high up there as far as attorneys for Trump. One of them is Kenneth Chesebro, who has been actually Chesebro, whatever. He's actually in the indictment. He is accused of actually writing the letter on how to commit election fraud with false electors. And he kind of wrote the plan in the memo and emailed, and unfortunately for him, it's all documented. And unfortunately for everybody who received it or was part of it, or in that whole compiling of information, they were all listed in the indictment. Well, anyway, Chesebro, he had actually pled guilty. He pled guilty to a smaller charge, not the RICO charge, because if he had pled guilty to the RICO charge, he would have lost his license. So part of his plea agreement was to go to the lower charge, which in a plea agreement, that's not really that abnormal. Often in a plea agreement, it's like tit for tat. You're just getting it. He's going to be a witness in the case. He's going to provide his statements and whatever he can for the prosecution. He's been giving affidavits. He's on probation, no jail time. Okay. He's on a long probation, actually, but he's not going to lose his license. And he actually had to submit a letter of apology to the court. And he had to allocate, of course. All right. The other lawyer, Sidney Powell, surprise, surprise, who, when the charges were first dropped, said she would never plead. But once looked at the evidence and what they had, listened to her attorney, and she also pled. And she's also on probation. She also will be a witness for the prosecution. And she is heavily involved in several conversations that are documented, phone conversations, emails, and all, in the organizing of a campaign, and actually knowing that some of this information was false and putting it forward as far as the election being tainted. And this false electorals that they were putting forward, this whole plan that was put in. She was an advisor and a lawyer for Donald Trump at the time. A third attorney, Jenna Ellis, has also pled guilty. Probation, letter of apology to court, same deal. Not the RICO charge. Also in part of this, and Jenna Ellis actually in her pleadings to the court actually said, if I had known now, if I knew then what I know now, I would never have made the decisions I made. She said, I was naive. I didn't do my due diligence. I actually believed what I was told instead of checking things out. And she was quite contrite in her statements to the court. She's also going to be a witness for the prosecution. She has admitted to several facts of the case. And that is the point that I want to stress here. No, I'm not a lawyer, but hey, I can read the writing on the wall. When you've got 3 attorneys who were complicit in the conspiracy here, and actually can document and actually prove and attest to the evidence that Fani Willis is putting forward, that's very credible. It's also very damaging. And it kind of makes things really iffy for everybody else who's left. It's going to be pick and choose who's going to get pleas and all. Fannie Willis's office has already, said that there would be, well, rumor. Fannie Willis didn't say it. I didn't see or hear anything where she said it. Well, mass media is kind of reporting that it's coming out of the office that Meadows isn't going to get a deal. Trump isn't going to get a deal. Giuliani has ruined any chance of getting a deal. It's probably not going to be one for Eastman either. All right. And all of these top names up there. All right. Meadows was actually dealing in the federal case, let's say. There's been reporting that he has actually sat with Jack Smith several times over the last year. So I don't know what's going on there. Fannie Willis and Jack Smith, these are two separate cases. This is a state case in Georgia about the election here. And the one that Jack Smith is running is federal. Okay, in that process. And so they are allowed to confer on information because law enforcement is allowed to do that. One of the motions put forward by Trump and his attorneys at this point is that they shouldn't be talking. And yet an attorney in the same hearing in December 1st, actually for Trump, actually said the opposite. We want them to confer. They need to get this all straight. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, why is, everything taking so long? We want to do this, the other thing. They should be conferring. They should be talking to each other. And yet the other attorney is trying to get everything thrown out because Fannie Willis sent a letter to the January 6th commission at one point in the beginning, way in the beginning of the January 6th commission. That, how unusual is that? Not very. You remember, like, we're talking about what happened during the elections at the time. January 6th was all about the elections and the different states that had problems, the different conversations, documentation of conversations that happened, and pressure that was put on the state legislators to change votes. So why wouldn't they be talking to the January 6th commission? I mean, it didn't make any sense to me, and I don't really see that that's going to go anywhere. But about this December 1st meeting, this hearing, basically they want the whole case tossed because they say, even as president, Donald Trump's freedom of speech to say that the election was fraud after multiple investigations to prove nothing, after they were advised by election officials, other attorneys, that there wasn't anything here. It was still his right of freedom of speech to go out and say that it was so. And there was a really long oral argument, but basically that was the gist. It's all based on freedom of speech. Okay. And then also because of he's running for president, that he's being persecuted for running for president, and the whole thing should be tossed out because he has immunity. Well, that is going to get clarified by the judge in this case, we would hope, because there is nothing in the Constitution that says if you're running for president, you cannot be charged for anything. It just doesn't exist. It doesn't even exist if you're sitting as president. It's just a matter of procedure and protocol. It is not written in the Constitution, contrary to popular belief lately in the mass media and everywhere else. Well, in regards to Georgia, Fannie Willis has put a pretty airtight. She is, based on her actual, prosecutorial career, she got a lot of racketeering experience. She knows how to build a RICO case, and she did. And a RICO case is based on actually conspiracy for gain. Okay. And that is what she's accusing Trump and everybody involved in doing, that they actually conspired to create this for gain or something and defrauded the public and violated numerous laws in her state in regards to the election. Now, this is serious, and we all should be really, really concerned as Americans when we're talking about our elections. Okay. I don't want to think that it could be violated. So that you can organize to do all of this. It wasn't as successful. It can be documented, and that's what this case is about. But I don't think you get to just deny results based on any of it. It wasn't like it wasn't investigated. You see, this is the part that really gets to me. There were 3 investigations, and one of them was from Trump's own cabinet, which came down and said, no, there's not enough here to turn it. Like, it just didn't happen that way. Sidney Powell had to actually admit that the statements she gave about the voting machines was wrong. They were theories. They were information that was twisted to fit the narrative. This has all been documented now. Yeah. And the actual truth or the facts of the case are not meeting the statements that were made prior. And then actually when they can document through text messages and emails that there was actually a chain of actual conspiracy here. This is what we're going to say. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. When we're going to do it. Where we're going to do it. That's being documented. That makes a good conspiracy RICO case. The people that are laughing off this case have not read the indictment. That's all I'm going to say about that. And I don't envy Scott McAfee right now with all of these motions, because the oral arguments that were given were quite spectacular. Talking about the damage to Donald Trump's career, talking about inhibiting him from campaigning appropriately, talking about, this has never been done before. This is true. It probably hasn't. But that doesn't mean it can't be. If a law was broken, it doesn't matter if we've never charged anybody for breaking that law before. Once it happens, we should be free to do it. Well, I hope I'm not putting you to sleep, Mark. This one's long. This one's really long. But I'm trying to actually answer my DMs appropriately. I've gotten so many on all of these different cases, and they knew I was following them. So just put it all together in one, And I'm not trying to actually slam Donald Trump at the same time. But you can't deny that all these cases are out there, and that there is something to each one. Okay. And I'm just trying to point out the particulars on it. I am very curious to hear Scott McAfee's decisions on the motions that were put forth in the 6-hour hearing, which I did link the video down below if anybody's brave enough to go through all of that. But there was one funny thing on it that I would like to say before I finish up with Fanny here. There was a female attorney in there. Okay, we have one more case after this. There was a female attorney in that hearing, and I do not recall her name. And I've looked through my notes. For some reason, I was laughing so hard, and I was so gobsmacked at what I had just heard. I didn't write it down. And I'm like, it's a 6-hour video. I really didn't go back and read it. But I will try to figure it out for you guys later. But the female attorney that was making a case as to why this whole Georgia election case is just bogus, because Trump should be allowed, in his personal belief, to say that he believes the election is fraudulent because, and I kid you not, she actually said this, he has personal knowledge that the 2016 election was tampered with by the Russians and the Chinese. He has personal knowledge of that. Yeah, exactly. The one who pointed out that they knew about the Russia meeting with the elections in 2016. She said that Donald Trump had personal knowledge of this, and this is why he believes the election is just corrupt. So, but I don't think he would be complaining if he won, because, he didn't come out and call the election corrupt when he won in 2016, even though he had personal knowledge of the interference of it. I don't know. I just couldn't even imagine why she thought that was a good idea. she kind of like threw him under the bus a little bit. I could just see the prosecution running with that one to find more out about it. I think a lot of people want to know a lot more about it now. And I think if Jack Smith was listening, and he was, I think he's going to want to know a lot more about it. Personal knowledge, yes. Just how would he have gained that, I wonder? I don't know. Maybe in the exchange of some documents, Rocket Couch? Like, I don't know. Quid pro quo? What can I tell you? I don't know. I just found that to be humorous. I did warn you my snark was going to come out eventually. Like, I can only hold it in for so long. But can we get to the last case? And just like we're going to finish this up before I put you all to sleep. And this stuff might be fascinating for me, but I'm quite willing to admit that it's probably not for all of you. But we're going to go to Jean Carroll. Now, if you've been following my channel and my true crime, I covered the first part of the Carroll case. It is based on defamation, that she says that she was sexually assaulted. And I'm going to use that term because that's what the jury decided on. Boom. We're going to go to the actual facts of the first case, which has already been tried. He was found guilty, $10 million settlement. Okay. The jury said, well, we cannot identify that it was R because, well, she does not admit to actually personal knowledge that she saw her. It was that. But they do feel that she was sexually assaulted, and she definitely was defamed. And they went with it. Judge Lewis Kaplan here actually put in a partial summary judgment ahead of time that there was enough evidence of the statements that he could see in writing, okay, of defamation, okay. Roberta Kaplan is also the attorney, no relationship to Judge Kaplan, is the actual attorney for Carroll. This was filed back in November 24th of 2022. It was amended because after the first judgment, this is the second one, okay, the first case was filed for statements that Donald Trump made while he was president, which caused a whole big thing about presidential immunity and not being tried. And it went to the Supreme Court, and they said the deciding factor, and here's where I'm going to help you out with the presidential immunity thing. Mark, you had asked a question about this, and this part will clarify it just a little bit more. In deciding, the Supreme Court, in their issuance of this statement, they made a reference to that in order to decide if he was actually... You need to decide if he was actually performing his presidential duties, that it is possible that he could make statements outside of his presidential duty and do things outside of his presidential duty, and that not everything that he does 24/7 is in relation to his presidential duties. And so when they looked at the statements that they made and decided they had nothing to do with presidential duties, they had to look at what his job requirements are as president, and he's working for the people, okay? And did it benefit the people for him to actually defame Jean Carroll? And the Supreme Court said no. So he could be tried, which let the first part of these tweets that he made and statements that he made, speeches that he made back in 2019, were actually able to be prosecuted. Now, well, not prosecuted because it's not criminal, it's civil, okay? Jean Carroll just put it in two different parts: before presidency, during presidency, and after presidency. These are those first statements. Now, what's important to know is that since the other trial already happened, there's actual documented fact that these statements were made, that he did do it, that the occurrence happened in accordance to the jury. The jury's actual summation is now entered in as, okay, partial summary judgment. The jury in this second part of the case will not even get to decide whether the sexual battery occurred or the defamation occurred. That is given. It happened. They just get to decide on the amount based on different tweets that happened and when it happened. Okay. For the defense, this is attorney. We're going to have Alina Haba and Tacopino. Okay. Again, this trial is going to be on January 24th, 2024. Okay. So it's coming soon. It's in New York. So there won't be video, but we will be able to give you updates periodically on what's going. But again, a jury's going to have to listen to the whole thing just to decide on the amount, not whether he's guilty or not. Okay. These are all from the comments in 2019. She actually amended this actual complaint because after the first trial was decided, he took to CNN and he just reiterated all the defamation over again, repeating it almost verbatim, and then calling her a whack job and all of this afterward. He then countersued her because the jury had downgraded it from R to sexual battery and assault. So he sued her for using the R word against him, but it got dismissed as frivolous because he was found guilty of a lesser charge that did have something to do with sexual assault. So he does not get to say that she didn't have any right to say it. If she believes it was the other in the matter of terminology, then it was. But that got dismissed. The motion to stay and dismiss were denied. Summary judgment was ending. And of course, there is actually, like, that's a filed and pending. That's already happened. They already entered the summary judgment. We're just waiting for the actual amount now. The judge has actually gone forward with that since the last time I wrote that. Okay. It's on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in Manhattan. They put everything together to expedite it and everything, but it was all denied. Okay. This trial, like I said, is going to be in January, and it's moved from the 15th, I think, to the 24th now. It was on the 15th, and there was a motion put forward to move it a week because of some other summary judgments. Okay. The judge in this case is Judge Lewis Kaplan. He already moved, like I said, September 6th, he came forward and said that the only question the jury will have is on damages. There is no denying the defamatory or the battery because the other jury verdict stands. And so the other jury verdict will go right in here because it's the same case. It was just split into two parts. It's the same situation, same actual crime, so to speak, even though it's a civil suit. All right. I'm going to look for questions. Is he trying to claim that he wasn't previously actually legally president, that he still has 2 terms in here? I don't know. Oh, Liam, like it's kind of crazy. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I know the personal knowledge, evidence. I want to see it too. I really do. Oh, hey, Robsky. Just got back from comparing mulled beers in the Krakow bars. I can confirm that they're all good. Good. Hey, Mrs. Cassandra, it's good to see you too. Thanks for being here. Okay. All right. I'm glad my voice keeps you here, Mark, but it's a little rough today, don't you think? Like, I feel like I got a frog sitting in there. Like, I can hear it and it's not good. Right. It always makes me laugh when I think of charges on battery cases because of batteries and charges, like in cables. Yeah, okay. Okay. I get it. It does sound like you had a good time there, Robsky. I'm happy for you visiting in Krakow and having a great vacation. I'm glad you're stopping in. But I'm about finishing up. I've been here an hour and a half already on all these Trump cases. So unless there's any questions, I've done my due diligence and actually responded to the requests in my DMs to put this forward for everybody in a timeline that you can look back at. There's plenty of documentation below in the description for those of you that want to go a little bit farther and read some of the legal documents that I just glanced over and listed like briefly, and some of the video, like the 6-hour video of the hearing. It got a bit droll, but there were some real golden nuggets in there. I will say that Stephen Saucloud did do a great oral argument for Judge McAfee. He's got a lot to think about in regards to whether or not this whole case is prejudicial, overly prejudicial to Donald Trump. And that's what one of the things he's going to have to decide. Also, venue, freedom of speech issues, evidentiary trails, you name it. You name it. There's so much in there that they're going to have to talk to. It also, remember that they were trying to separate the cases. Several of the defendants were opting for their case to be moved to federal court. Donald Trump was one of them, but he has rescinded that application in that motion. Mark Meadows was another. Mark Meadows is still fighting. That's at the Supreme Court, I think, you know. But, and they also did not opt for a speedy trial. Okay, I think only Powell and Cheeseborough had opted for a speedy trial, and they actually took pleas in before the hearing on those motions was that week. They took the pleas a couple of days before, so that was canceled and became moot. Everybody else has moved forward for the trial and is going through. I do believe we're going to see some more pleas. One of the other ones I didn't mention was the bail bondsman. Oh gosh, what was his name? Scott something. Hold on a minute. Scott Hall, the bail bondsman, was the first one to plead out, actually. And so there are actually 4 pleas, not just the 3 lawyers that I mentioned. But the fact that those were lawyers that were intricately involved in the conspiracy part of this whole thing with Georgia and have pled down from the RICO to actually admit to the whole conspiracy part. In order to have the RICO charges, you have to actually be able to prove conspiracy. And I think just with these 3 taking the plea, she's going to be able to prove conspiracy. When your case gets heard in the Supreme Court, is there the chance of harsher penalties if you are found guilty? No, they do have different statutes, and they have different requirements, but I don't think just because it's there, it's harsher. It depends on if it's a state level Supreme Court or federal, and it's like, yep. The Christkindle market is back. Oh, that sounds lovely. That does. Thank you for being here, Mrs. Cassandra. All right. On that, guys, I think I'm going to go drink a cup of hot tea. I will be back on Friday for more true crime. And we're going to talk about Andrew Tate, if you're not all too bored. Anyway, have a really, really good one. I didn't put the banner up at all. I think I will just for a minute while I get ready to say goodbye to everybody. But I am glad that you were here. Thank you for tolerating this really long-winded presentation on all of the cases that are open on Donald Trump, civil and criminal. Of course, it's not all the petty stuff with these businesses, back and forth. And like there are thousands of them, but there is an actual, if you Google search it, there is actually a website that can tell you and break them down into the types that they are and everything and what's still open. And it gets updated like as you're watching it. It's kind of cool. Yeah. Thank you there, Mrs. Cassandra. Oh, let me take that down. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Oh. Yep. She said, share and comment on the video. Get the bear out there. Get the best bear out there. Well, thank you, Mark. That's very flattering of you. I appreciate it. Oh, root ale. Is that going to help? Thank you, Liam. I'm hoping it was trackable. Leave me a comment because I want to make sure that I actually made sense out of some of them, because in my DMs, that's what they were asking for. Just break it down into little pieces for me, because I don't understand. Every day there's something about a Trump lawsuit in the news every day, and people were having trouble keeping them all straight, So what I tried to do is map them out: the who, the what, the where, and the when, and a little bit about where they are right now. Of course, I'm not going to do it like the articles or the videos that people are doing, like one particular part of it all the time. I chose not to do that. I just wanted to kind of bullet it for everybody and then talk about some of the things that I experienced over the last week or so, especially Scott McAvee's court 6-hour motion hearing. I was just gobsmacked, you know. Yeah, just gobsmacked over the whole thing. Yeah. But on that, okay, now I'm really going to go because either that or my voice is going to go, and I want to come back on Friday. So, and of course, I want to be well for my weekend shows, you know. Yeah. That reminds me, Mrs. C, I got to talk to you. I got an idea, but shh, I don't want to tell them. I just want to tell you. So I'll talk to everybody later. Have a great one. Thank you to my moderators, the best moderators around. Thank you for making it easy. Thank you to the chat for keeping me entertained, asking some questions, and not falling asleep. I really appreciate it. As always, don't forget to like, share, and comment. I'm always available for questions. Go ahead and put them on the back of the videos. You know I'm going to answer them. I answer every comment. Have a great night, everybody. Happy Wednesday. And be well. I'll see you on Friday.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Justice requires us to remember when any citizen denies his fellow, saying his color is not mine, or his beliefs are strange and different. In that moment, he betrays America.
Be nice and patient and continue to pray. In 100 or 200 years, the problem will work itself out.
I believe that truth is the glue that holds government together. Not only our government, but civilization itself.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
This nation was founded by men of many nations and backgrounds. It was founded on the principle that all men are created equal, and that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened.
America is never wholly herself unless she is engaged in high moral principle. We as a people have such a purpose today. It is to make kinder the face of the nation and gentler the face of the world.
There is nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America.
Through much of the last century, America's faith in freedom and democracy was a rock in a raging sea.
Starting today, we must pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and begin again the work of remaking America.